There is a quiet moment that almost no one talks about. It happens in the seconds after you wake up, before your body has even moved, but your mind is already running. Your eyes open, the room is still. Nothing has happened yet, and yet inside you, everything feels loud. Thoughts begin to stack on top of each other. Conversations replay, decisions rehearse themselves. Responsibilities line up like they have been waiting all night just to speak first. Before your feet touch the floor, you are already negotiating with the future. If this feels familiar, let me say something clearly and gently. This message is not finding you by accident, not because you are special in the way the world defines special, not because you are above others, but because you are tired in a way that rest alone has not been able to fix. Many people are exhausted in their bodies, but some are exhausted in their spirit, and spiritual exhaustion does not come from doing nothing. It comes from carrying what you were never meant to carry alone. In the biblical tradition, there is a repeated pattern. God never asks human beings to manage the entire outcome of their lives. He asks them to listen, to trust, and to take the next faithful step. Yet in the modern world, we have been trained to believe something very different. We have been taught that safety comes from control, that peace comes from preparation, that if we just think far enough ahead, worry hard enough, and stay tense enough, we can prevent loss, failure, or pain. But Scripture tells a different story. From Abraham leaving his homeland without a map, to Moses standing before the sea with no visible solution, to the disciples being called before they were qualified, God's way has always required one primary posture before all others. Not certainty, not speed, not mastery, but belief. Not belief as a slogan, not belief as denial, but belief as a lived posture of trust. This video you're about to hear is built around a single, deceptively simple idea. You have one job right now, not 10, not 1,000 mental rehearsals, not the impossible task of controlling outcomes you cannot reach. Just one job: to believe that God is already at work in ways you cannot yet see, and to align your actions with peace rather than panic. In the next parts, we will slowly unpack what this means. Not in a motivational way, not in a shallow or extreme way, but through a grounded, thoughtful lens shaped by theology, scripture, and lived human experience. We will explore why doing more is not always faith, why anxiety can disguise itself as responsibility, why rest can be one of the most disciplined spiritual acts you will ever practice, and why belief is not a feeling you wait for, but a posture you return to again and again. So as you listen, do not rush. Do not try to fix your whole life at once. Let this be a moment of stillness before movement. Because sometimes, the most powerful shift does not begin with action, but with releasing the weight you were never meant to carry. When you are ready, we will move into part 1, where we examine the hidden cost of trying to manage everything and why faith was never meant to feel like suffocation. Part 1. The invisible. Weight you've been carrying. There is a kind of pressure that does not announce itself loudly. It does not always come with panic attacks or visible breakdowns. Sometimes, it simply shows up as a constant tension in the chest, a mind that never truly powers down, and a sense that rest must be earned rather than received. This pressure is subtle, but it is heavy. Many people believe they are being responsible, disciplined, or faithful, when in reality they are slowly exhausting their spirit by trying to manage what was never assigned to them. In Scripture, there is a clear distinction between human responsibility and divine responsibility. Human beings are called to obedience. God reserves the role of orchestration. Yet somewhere along the way, many of us accepted an unspoken contract. If I stay alert enough, think far enough ahead, and prepare for every possible outcome, nothing bad will happen. This belief feels logical. It even feels wise. but it produces a life that feels tight rather than free. Think about the way your day often begins. Before anything has gone wrong, your mind is already scanning for threats. You replay conversations that haven't happened yet. You prepare responses to scenarios that may never arrive. You try to predict emotional outcomes so you can avoid disappointment. On the surface, this looks like planning. Underneath, it is fear wearing the costume of productivity. The Bible speaks often about fear, but not in simplistic terms. Fear is not always trembling or avoidance. Sometimes fear shows up as control. Control over timing, control over perception, control over results. The book of Proverbs repeatedly warns against leaning too heavily on one's own understanding, not because understanding is bad, but because it was never meant to bear the full weight of life. When you try to manage everything, something inside you begins to strain. This is why the transcript speaks of life feeling like carrying a backpack filled with bricks. It is an image that resonates because many people recognize it immediately in their bodies. You can function while carrying it. You can even succeed while carrying it. But over time, the weight changes you. Your reactions become sharper. Your patience grows thinner. Your joy becomes conditional. You begin to believe that if you loosen your grip, everything will fall apart. But here is a truth that Scripture quietly but consistently reveals. God never entrusted the outcome of the world to human anxiety. He entrusted it to His own faithfulness. Jesus Himself addressed this exact mindset when speaking about worry. He did not condemn preparation or effort. He confronted the illusion that worry adds protection. Worry does not extend life. It compresses it. And yet many believers live as if constant tension is proof of devotion, as if being exhausted is evidence of faithfulness. But faithfulness, in the biblical sense, is not measured by how much you carry. It is measured by whether you are carrying the right things. You were never meant to carry the burden of how. How will this work out? How will this be resolved? How will I make this happen? Those questions feel urgent, but they belong to God's domain. Your domain is the step, the response, the obedience that is asked of you today, not the outcome 10 steps from now. When you attempt to manage both, your soul begins to choke. That choking feeling the transcript describes is not weakness. It is misalignment. Just as the body suffers when it tries to consciously control involuntary systems, the soul suffers when it tries to replace trust with tension. This is why doing more does not always bring peace. Sometimes it only increases the noise. You can send the extra message. You can check the numbers again. You can rehearse the conversation one more time. But notice what happens inside you when you do. The relief is brief. The anxiety returns stronger. This cycle is not a failure of faith. It is a sign that your spirit is ready to learn a different rhythm. Part 2. When action comes from fear, and when it comes from faith. From the outside, fear-driven action and faith-driven action can look almost identical. Both involve movement, both involve effort, both can even produce results. But inwardly, they come from very different sources, and they leave very different traces in the soul. This is why so many sincere people feel confused. They are doing everything they were taught to do. They are working, planning, praying, responding, adjusting. And yet inside, something feels poisoned. Scripture helps us understand why. Faith, in the biblical sense, is not passive. It does not mean sitting still and waiting for life to happen. Faith moves, but faith moves without panic. Fear also moves, but it moves urgently, desperately, and relentlessly. Fear whispers that delay is danger. Fear insists that if you do not act immediately, you will lose something essential. This is why fear often disguises itself as responsibility. It says, if I don't say something now, I'll be misunderstood. If I don't push this forward, the opportunity will disappear. If I don't figure this out today, I'm already behind. These thoughts feel reasonable. They even feel mature. But notice the internal cost. When action comes from fear, your body tightens, your breath becomes shallow, your mind races even after the task is done. Even success feels unstable because you do not trust it to last. The transcript describes this beautifully by pointing to small, everyday behaviors, sending extra messages that diminish your dignity, over-explaining yourself in conversations, constantly refreshing screens as if certainty might suddenly appear. These are not moral failures, they are signals. They reveal an inner state that has learned to equate control with safety. Faith-driven action feels different. It still requires courage, it still requires discipline, but it does not require you to abandon your nervous system to survive. Faith-driven action is steady. It moves at a pace that allows your spirit to stay open rather than clenched. In Scripture, belief is consistently linked with peace, not because circumstances are easy, but because trust reorders the inner world. The Apostle Paul wrote about a peace that surpasses understanding, not a peace that ignores reality, but one that guards the heart and mind, even while reality remains unresolved. This is what the transcript means when it says, belief doesn't panic. Belief says, I don't need the entire plan today. I need the next faithful step. That sentence carries deep theological weight. Throughout the Bible, God rarely reveals the full picture at once. He gives enough light for the next step, not the entire road. This is not punishment, it is formation. If human beings could see the whole outcome, many would try to control it, protect it, or rush it before it is ready. So God teaches His people to walk by trust rather than sight. This is where many people get stuck. They confuse waiting with inaction. They confuse peace with passivity. But faith-driven action is not lazy. It requires restraint. It takes discipline to pause before responding. It takes strength to send one clear message instead of 5 emotional ones. It takes maturity to act without needing immediate reassurance. Fear wants constant feedback. Faith is willing to move without applause. This is why faith-driven action may feel quieter, slower, and less dramatic. But it produces a different kind of fruit. When action comes from faith, you may still feel tired, but you do not feel internally fractured. You may face uncertainty, but you are not consumed by it. There is a sense of alignment, even when answers are incomplete. This alignment is not accidental. It is the result of choosing peace as a guiding signal rather than urgency. Part 3. Belief is not a feeling, it is a posture. One of the greatest misunderstandings in modern spiritual language is the idea that belief is something you either feel or you do not. Many people think belief arrives as confidence, as certainty, as an emotional assurance that everything will be okay. But Scripture paints a very different picture. Belief, in its biblical form, is not an emotion that appears and stays. It is a posture you return to, often in the presence of doubt. This is why Jesus repeatedly spoke to people who believed and still struggled. This is why Scripture includes prayers like, I believe, help my unbelief. Belief is not the absence of questions. It is the decision about which voice gets to lead when questions remain. The transcript makes this clear when it says that believing is not a mood, not a sentence you say and forget, but a posture you practice throughout the day. This is deeply aligned with historical Christian thought. Faith has always been understood as trust in motion, not static agreement, but relational reliance. This matters because life does not pause while faith forms. Bills still exist. Decisions still demand answers. Relationships still remain complex. And it is precisely in these unresolved spaces that belief becomes real. Anyone can believe when everything is clear. Belief shows its strength when clarity has not yet arrived. The transcript uses the image of holding a compass in fog. You cannot see the entire path, but you can still orient yourself correctly. This image echoes a central biblical theme: walking by faith, not by sight. Sight demands visibility. Faith demands orientation. When you live as if belief requires emotional certainty, you place yourself in a constant cycle of self-judgment. On good days, you think you are faithful. On anxious days, you think you have failed. But faith was never meant to be measured by emotional stability. It is measured by direction. Which way are you turning when pressure rises? Which voice do you obey when urgency demands control? This is where belief becomes disciplined. It takes discipline to pray in the morning and not immediately take the prayer back with your thoughts. It takes discipline to choose calm action when your instincts want speed. It takes discipline to let uncertainty exist without treating it as a threat. This discipline is not cold or rigid. It is gentle and consistent. The transcript describes belief as refusing to let panic be your leadership voice. This is not denial of reality. It is discernment. Panic is loud, but it is not wise. Urgency feels convincing, but it often lacks clarity. Belief creates space. Space to listen. Space to notice. Space to respond rather than react. When belief becomes a posture, your inner life begins to shift. You may still experience pressure, but it no longer defines you. You may still feel uncertainty, but it no longer commands you. This does not mean life becomes easy. It means life becomes aligned, and alignment has consequences. Your discernment sharpens, your timing improves, your yes becomes clearer, and your no becomes cleaner. You stop chasing every impulse. You stop explaining yourself to every fear. You begin to recognize that God's guidance often arrives quietly, and that frantic living is one of the fastest ways to miss it. Part 4. The rhythm of faith in ordinary days. Faith is often imagined as something dramatic, a defining moment, a bold declaration, a visible breakthrough. But in Scripture, faith is more commonly formed through rhythm. Daily practices, repeated choices, small obediences that do not make headlines, but slowly reshape the soul. The transcript offers a simple rhythm, not as a formula, but as a way of living that keeps belief active rather than theoretical. This rhythm matters because human beings are not shaped only by what they believe, but by what they practice. What you repeat becomes what you trust. The first movement of this rhythm begins in the morning, before the noise, before the screens, before the mind is allowed to sprint ahead. A simple acknowledgement, gratitude for waking up, a declaration of trust that does not demand explanation, not asking for the whole plan, not demanding certainty, just asking for today's insight and today's step. This mirrors ancient prayer practices where the day is offered before it is filled. It is an act of orientation, not control. You're not saying nothing will go wrong. You're saying you will not lead your day with panic. The second movement of the rhythm appears when pressure returns, because it always does. Faith is not tested in silence. It is tested when responsibility, uncertainty, and urgency collide. This is where belief becomes practical. Instead of dramatic overhauls, the transcript emphasizes one small action that matches peace. Not the loudest move, not the fastest move, the cleanest one. This is a powerful theological insight. God often works through what is faithful, not what is frantic. One honest conversation, one necessary pause, one avoided spiral. These moments may seem insignificant, but they are formative. They teach the nervous system that safety does not depend on control. They teach the spirit that obedience can feel calm. The third movement comes at the end of the day. This is perhaps the most difficult for many people. Releasing what remains unfinished, letting go of what was not resolved, trusting God with what could not be reached. This is where rest becomes faith. In biblical language, sleep is not just physical recovery. It is an act of surrender. When you sleep, you admit that you are not the sustainer of the universe. The transcript speaks of rest not as a reward for worrying enough, but as a signal of trust. This idea runs counter to modern culture, which glorifies exhaustion and treats rest as indulgence. But Scripture consistently links rest with trust. The Sabbath was given not because people were weak, but because they were human. This rhythm is not about perfection. Some days you will forget. Some days you will fall back into old habits. Faith is not broken by inconsistency. It is weakened by discouragement. What matters is returning to the posture, returning to the rhythm, returning to the decision to let belief lead again. Over time, this rhythm produces something subtle but powerful. Your inner noise decreases. Your discernment improves. Your actions feel cleaner, less reactive. You become easier to guide, not because God was distant before, but because you are no longer drowning out guidance with constant urgency. Part 5. Holding the compass. When the road is hidden, there comes a moment in every faith journey when clarity does not arrive on schedule. You have prayed, you have waited, you have tried to act with integrity, and still, the fog remains. This is often the moment when people assume something is wrong. They assume they missed God. They assume they are behind. They assume faith has failed. But Scripture suggests something very different. Some of the most formative seasons in biblical history occurred when the path was not visible, yet movement was still required. The Israelites did not receive a detailed map through the wilderness. They were given daily guidance. Manna arrived one day at a time. Direction came one step at a time. This was not inefficiency. It was training. The transcript captures this truth with the image of a compass in fog. You may not see the horizon, but you can still orient yourself correctly. This distinction is essential. Faith does not promise visibility, it promises direction. When people demand the entire plan before they move, what they are really seeking is control, not guidance. Control wants guarantees. Faith asks for trust. And here is where belief becomes most powerful. Not when life makes sense, but when it does not, and you choose steadiness anyway. The transcript speaks about staying steady while the answer is still loading. This idea deserves careful attention. Staying steady does not mean pretending nothing hurts. It does not mean suppressing emotion or ignoring difficulty. It means refusing to let panic become the voice that leads you. Panic is persuasive. It speaks quickly. It frames uncertainty as danger. But panic is not discerning, it is reactive. Faith slows the moment down just enough to hear something quieter, a clean impulse, a restrained response, a gentle redirection. This is why belief often looks unimpressive from the outside. One calm step instead of 10 frantic ones. One clear decision instead of endless analysis. Yet over time, these quiet steps stack. They form a path that only becomes visible in retrospect. Many people look back on their lives and say they never saw the way clearly in advance, but they recognize it unmistakably afterward. This is not coincidence. It is how faith works. The transcript reminds us that God never asked human beings to be the architects of outcomes. He asked them to stay close enough to be led. This is a deeply theological statement. It speaks to relationship, not performance. Faith is not about producing results for God. It is about remaining responsive to Him. When you live this way, something unexpected happens. Your inner world becomes less reactive. Your decisions become less defensive. Your timing becomes more precise. Not because life becomes easier, but because your orientation becomes clearer. You stop demanding certainty as the price of obedience. You learn to trust direction without full disclosure. This is not weakness, it is maturity. Part 6. Your one job, returned to again and again. When everything is stripped back, when the noise quiets and the urgency loses its grip, what remains is surprisingly simple. You were never asked to manage the entire future. You were never assigned the burden of making everything work. You were never meant to carry the weight of outcomes you cannot control. You were given one job, to believe, not as an abstract idea, not as a temporary feeling, but as a daily posture of trust that shapes how you move through the world. This is where many people misunderstand belief. They think belief means certainty. They think belief means confidence without wavering. They think belief means the absence of fear, but belief in its truest form often coexists with fear. What matters is not whether fear appears, but whether it gets to lead. The transcript emphasizes that belief keeps the spirit open and the discernment sharp. This is not poetic language, it is deeply practical. When you are frantic, you override your own wisdom. You rush past intuition. You silence subtle guidance. But when belief becomes your posture, you become receptive. Receptive to correction. Receptive to timing. Receptive to doors opening in unexpected ways. This does not mean life unfolds without difficulty. It means difficulty does not own you. The world trains people to live as if every day is an emergency meeting with the future. Faith invites a different orientation, one where obedience is safer than overthinking, where peace is a better signal than urgency, where rest is not a failure of discipline, but an expression of trust. Returning to belief is rarely dramatic. It happens in quiet moments, when you choose not to send the extra message, when you stop explaining yourself to imagined critics, when you release control at the end of the day and allow sleep to come. These choices may seem small, but they are formative. They teach the soul that it does not have to perform for safety. They teach the body that it is allowed to unclench. Over time, belief becomes less about effort and more about orientation. You stop asking, "How do I make this happen?" and start asking, "What is mine to do right now?" That question changes everything, because the answer is almost always smaller than your fear expects. One step, one response, one act of trust. This is how faith is lived. Not in grand declarations alone, but in the quiet refusal to let panic dictate your direction. As this message comes to a close, let this remain with you. If you are in fog, you are not lost. If you are tired, you are not failing. If you do not see the whole road, you are not behind. Hold the compass, take the step, return to belief, again and again. Because God has never needed you to carry the outcome. He has only asked you to stay close enough to be led. Conclusion, a quiet ending and a true beginning. There is something deeply comforting about realizing that faith was never meant to exhaust you. Not because life is easy, not because uncertainty disappears, but because you were never designed to live as the manager of outcomes. Throughout this entire message, one truth has surfaced again and again. Belief is not about controlling the future. It is about aligning with God in the present. When you stop demanding the whole horizon, something inside you softens. You begin to notice that guidance does not usually arrive as a loud command. It comes as clarity for the next step, as restraint when you want to rush, as peace that does not need permission from circumstances. This is why your one job matters so much. Belief keeps you open. Belief keeps you listening. Belief keeps you from mistaking urgency for wisdom. And perhaps most importantly, belief frees you from the illusion that everything depends on you. When you live this way, you begin to see your life differently. Moments that once felt like delays begin to feel like protection. Silence that once felt like absence begins to feel like preparation. Rest that once felt irresponsible begins to feel holy. You may still face fog. You may still carry questions. You may still walk through seasons where answers are slow. But you will no longer walk alone with the weight of making everything happen. Instead, you will walk with orientation, with trust, with a steady pace that allows you to hear God's guidance as it comes. Not all at once, not perfectly, but faithfully. So if you take anything from this message, let it be this. You do not need to prove your faith by exhausting yourself. You do not need to earn peace through constant effort. You do not need to see the entire path to take the next step. Hold the compass. Choose the posture of belief. Take what is yours to do today, and then rest. Because faith, lived this way, does not just change how you think, it changes how you live, quietly, steadily, one faithful step at a time.